Hi friends, my name is Emily and welcome back to my channel. I come to you on the last day in June and it is hot. It is like 30 degrees in this office. It's about to be the start of a long weekend here in Canada. I'm just gonna share with you my thoughts on the books that I read at the end of May and the beginning of June. The last book that I talked about in my May reading wrap-up was Firestarter by Stephen King, and I then went and read 2 more books. So on May 31st, I finished The Lighthouse Witches by C.J. Cook. I impulse purchased this in 2021 when I was still buying books and I struggled to get into it then. I maybe made it like 100 pages in the physical copy of the book. For this reading, I did switch to audio to like help myself get over that hump. What is considered a spoiler for this book? Okay, I'm gonna read you the blurb because there is a little bit of a twist here and I don't want to spoil it. So what I'm about to tell you is on the dust jacket of the book. Liv Stay flees to an island with her 3 daughters in search of a home. She doesn't believe in witches or dark omens or hauntings, but within months her daughter Luna will be the only one of them left. 20 years later, Luna is drawn back to the place her family vanished. As the last sister left, it's up to her to find out the truth. But what really happened at the lighthouse all those years ago? Okay, if you've watched the television show Dark, there are similar vibes. Like if you know, right? Like if you don't know Dark, this also doesn't help you. I will say that it was easier reading the physical book because you have different women's perspectives in different time periods. There were actually 3 different audiobook narrators. This is more a review of the audiobook than anything. Don't read this on audio if you can avoid it. The 3 women's voices were so similar that I was thinking throughout, like, gosh, this would be really nice if they'd gotten 3 different women to do this. Like, that would make this so much easier. And then I got to the credits of the audiobook where it credited 3 separate human beings, and I was like, oh, great. It was confusing listening to it on audiobook. Like, you really had to be focused. This was not a, like, heavy multitasking kind of listen. This was like a quietly crochet, like a straight line, no counting, no patterns. Like, this is a water the grass, water the garden kind of audiobook, if that makes sense. Like, it required some concentration. So the audiobook, I would not recommend. I thought that this had a very cool concept, and I can't say what that concept is without spoiling it. I'm genuinely struggling here. This sounded like it would work for me. We have a story about mothers and daughters and sisters. We have a story about an isolated location of the lighthouse. We have creepy folklore. We have a mystery, a big mystery, ooh. And I just think it was badly executed. Like, at no point was I enjoying myself, I think because I've seen it done better. Which is disappointing because, like, everything about this book I really wanted to like. So I read that on the last day in May. I gave it 2 out of 5 stars and it came from my TBR. Then I read Below Zero. It is the 3rd STEMinist novella and it was an absolute fucking delight. Hannah is very much into sex for pleasure over like relationships. She has prioritized her career, trying to be a woman in STEM and finding the dream job over making sacrifices for a relationship. However, that doesn't mean that she's like a celibate, like prude throughout all of grad school. Like, she's like, I'm gonna have both. I'm gonna fulfill my sexual desires, have emotional connections with people, but not make sacrifices with committed long-term relationships. That's not where Hannah can be at this moment in her life. And I think that's nice. I think that's quite nice to see in fiction. This is about her getting a dream job at NASA and then being put on a mission that gets her in a little bit of trouble, and this guy that she hooked up with once who wanted a serious relationship but she said no at the time ends up coming to rescue her, and because it's a romance, of course they get together. This is my favorite of the 3 Ali Hazelwood novellas. I finished this on May 31st. I rated it 5 out of 5 stars. I borrowed that from the library. In June, I read it 2 more times on June 1st and June 4th. The second time that I listened to it, I just needed something to listen to while doing some chores. And the third time that I listened to it, I was really sad and like totally unmotivated to pick up anything new. Like I didn't have the bandwidth to get invested in another story and new characters, and I still had it on hold from the library, so I just listened to it again. I reread it for a third time, and then I returned it right away because I probably would have listened to it a fourth time. It just became like a comforting read, and I never thought I would be that person, but I am. If you followed my video in May, I took a little bit of a dive into the romance genre. What I was really waiting for was Pen's story. I wanted to see what happened with Penelope and Colin, because that is the next season of the television show that we're going to get. I really hope that they change quite a bit about the television show, because the book is not great. Colin really notices Pen after she has dropped a lot of weight, and then she's seen as beautiful by this guy that she's been pining after, which I don't love. I'm pretty sure the television show has confirmed that they are not doing that, which thank goodness. Let's have some positive fat rep on screen. It's still a Bridgerton novel. It suffers from all of the toxic masculinity that Julia Quinn is really great at writing. It wasn't the worst Bridgerton novel that I've read, but it definitely confirmed that I am done. I will continue to watch the television show because it's like visual candy. It is spectacle. It is colorful. It is instrumental pop song covers. It is exactly the trash that I look for when the world feels shitty. Finished that on June 1st. I gave it 3 stars, which for a Bridgerton novel is pretty decent. And that is my last engagement with the Bridgerton series. Knock on wood. Then I borrowed The Switch by Beth O'Leary. So Beth O'Leary wrote Flatshare. The reason I wanted this is because, again, I was looking for those cozy comfort reads, and this one intrigued me because it is like The Holiday, like that I associate it as a Christmas movie, The Holiday, where Cameron Diaz and Kate Winslet swap lives and houses. It's like that, but with a grandmother-granddaughter. So like 20-something-year-old Lena ends up going to this small town community where her grandmother lives and gets involved in like a quirky Stars Hollow cast of locals and taking on a lot of the grandmother's responsibilities within the community. And the 80-year-old Eileen Cotton goes to London. She's a single lady for the first time in a long time, and there are no men that she wants to date in her tiny town. So she goes to London and ends up living in like this flat with Lena's equally young roommates. Like, she's talking about her dating life and her sex life as an 80-year-old woman, and looking at the community that she could build in the apartment complex and how she builds these people together and like pulls some shut-ins out of their space. The grandmother story, I loved. I would read, I would watch, I would follow Eileen Cotton to like the ends of this earth on whatever adventure she goes on. I think that part of this novel was amazing. I think Lena, 20-something in Stars Hollow, the equivalent of like the English equivalent of Stars Hollow, was not that interesting to me. That reads more typical rom-com. The sections of the novel were really unevenly weighted for me. You would think that I would be more interested in what the person closer to my age was up to, but absolutely not. Like, she's doing exactly what you expect the rom-com heroine to do on her trip to the small town. I found it so compelling to see 80-year-old Eileen Cotton in the city, like going out for drinks, creating an online dating profile, like learning to use technology, connecting with younger folks, and having this like intergenerational relationship with other people. Like, I found that so much more compelling. Because I loved Eileen's story so much, I'm willing to forget how weak I found Lena's story. So I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. This might be a great book to like gift to your mom and read with your mom, or like gift to your grandma and read with your grandma if they're readers, and like just have an opportunity to chat about like being women at different stages in your life. Like, I really think this could be a fun read. Finished out on June 2nd, and I borrowed that from the library. Then I requested access to an ARC for the sequel of A Marvelous Light. I read A Marvelous Light earlier this year. It is queer fantasy that reminds me of like Harry Potter grown up. If you're thinking about book 7, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, where you have folks looking for and trying to figure out whether or not these like magical thing of fairy tale is real, and like murder mystery ensues. So while the first book was following Robin and Edwin, who become a couple, I mean, it's romance. Is it a spoiler that they become a couple if it's romance? This is a queer fantasy romance about Robin's sister, Maud, who is on a ship at sea. They are sailing from America back to England, and Maud is accompanying an elderly magician who is then murdered, and her cabin is ransacked and some items are stolen. Maybe one of them is part of this magical folklore object. Dun dun dun! And so within the closed space of the ship, Maud ends up assembling this tiny party of people who have all different skills to help her solve the murder mystery. And of course, because this is fantasy romance, it's queer fantasy romance, Maud ends up exploring her sexuality with a magician named Violet. Being stuck on the ship was fun. The mystery aspect of it was fun. It's just as steamy as the first novel. So again, we have quite graphic sex scenes, so you have to be okay with that. Like, when I say that this is like grown-up Harry Potter in terms of the vibes, like very loosely the vibes of book 7 where they're looking for the Deathly Hallows, I do mean that it is adult. Very graphic sex scenes. So if you're giving this to an older teen who has outgrown Harry Potter but like wants some of that vibe still, know that. This was such a good read. I am so excited to see these two couples come together in the third novel. So I believe this is a trilogy. I believe this is called the Last Binding trilogy at this point, so only one more book. And now I have to wait even longer for it because I got access to an ARC. This book, A Restless Truth, isn't even out yet. So I'm going to be waiting a very long time for the third book, but I am so excited. At some point when I am no longer in this no-buy year, I would love to buy physical copies of these two books, add them to my library, add them to my collection, because I can definitely see myself rereading this. Then I read and reread Follow Me to Ground by Sue Rainford. I actually have a like 2-hour and some odd minute live stream that just happened this past Monday, pulling this book to pieces. This is a weird book. A reviewer described it as odd and muscular, and this is a meaty, weighty text that you could pull apart in so many different ways. This is about Ada, a non-human magical being born of the ground, capital T, the, capital G, ground. She lives with her father, curing humans of their ailments, and she's lived decades but looks not quite adult. Everybody identifies her as not quite adult. Tension occurs within the family, within their quiet way of life, when Ada starts sleeping with adult human man named Samson. Yep. Content warnings for miscarriage, incest, pedophilia. Those are the really big ones. I don't want to say too much on because I literally talked about this for like 2+ hours the other day. If you liked Uprooted by Naomi Novik, I think there's maybe something here. If you're into folklore, there's something a little bit here for you. If you're into women's stories, questions about agency, there's something in here for you. If you are quite familiar with Freud and his nonsense, there's probably something in here for you. I finished this on June 20th. I gave it 4 to 5 stars. It was a new buy for the book club. And then I reread it and finished that on June 27th. I was putting my show notes together for it, so I was rereading it. There are some flaws in the logic that start to fall apart if you think about it critically. Like the first time that I read it, it was just such a wild ride. The second time that I read it, I was like, wait a minute, I think that you've contradicted yourself, and I'm not sure if we're supposed to not have noticed that or have noticed it and not believe our narrator. Is Ada unreliable? Is that why this doesn't add up? I haven't decided yet. It's not a perfect read, but it is muscular, as the one reviewer said. So I finished that on June 27th, gave it 4 to 5 stars, and that was a reread. Then I had a terrible weekend. I happened to have a hold come in from the library. I had a really shitty couple of days. I was exhausted. I wasn't in the mood for romance, but I also didn't have the brain power for literally anything else. And I was like, well, I know what I'm getting into because rom-com has a formula. I borrowed the Roughest draft by Emily Wibberley and Siegemund-Broka, who are actually a married couple in real life. And it is about authors Katrina and Nathan, who have co-written a best-selling novel in the past. They're on contract for a second book, but they've had a massive public falling out. Katrina has actually retired, and Nathan is trying to get solo books published, and his publishing house is refusing to publish him unless he produces that last book that he's on contract for with Katrina. And so they agree to do it, and they agree to get back together. So it is a friends to enemies to lovers rom-com. The thing that bothered me is that the book that they're writing is supposed to be about divorce. So it's not like a genre rom-com. I'm getting the vibe that it's supposed to be like Sally Rooney level literary writing. The problem is that this book is genre romance quality writing. I'm reading about how these two are so like prize-worthy literate. Ugh. But the quality of the book that I am reading is not for that audience. It is for a genre romance audience. Something about that broke my brain and I didn't like it, and there's a lot like going against this book. Like I was exhausted, sleep deprived, and literally looking for something to fill space while I felt like shit from not sleeping very well. Grain of salt? I mean, if it sounds like your jam, I do think that the characters were interesting. I thought that the friends to enemies to lovers, the flipping back and forth between past and present, between like 4 years ago, 6 years ago when they met at like a writer's retreat, like I thought the flipping around was great. I mean, it's definitely better than any Tessa Bailey novel that I've read where people have baseball bat-sized genitals and are like a bundle of red flags. Like the the basis here, like the bar that I seem to be interested in, that the male romantic lead be a decent human being, like we've met that bar. So I gave this 2.5 stars, like a 50%, middle of the road. It was fine. I rounded this up to 3 stars on Goodreads because I feel like I personally round up a lot of the time. Those are the books that I read at the end of May and June. I think I might be in a reading slump. Despite the fact that I've kept reading things, I think I might be in a reading slump. I'm hoping that this Canada Day long weekend allows me the time to like relax and sleep. Like we literally have nothing high stakes planned this weekend because our company has offices in both Canada and the US. We're getting the 1st off for Canada Day and the 4th off for July 4th. Also, the majority of our clients are American, so they're not around anyway for us to do work for them. I'm hoping to just potato a little bit, maybe actually sit in the beautiful backyard that I've been working so hard on and just read a nice book. That's where I'm gonna leave it for today. So the August book club book is Silver in the Woods by Emily Tesh. We will be meeting on the last day of August. I think that's a Wednesday. I'll post the information on the screen here, and we'll have a live show to discuss that book. I am kind of excited because I feel like this is maybe gonna dialogue nicely with Follow Me to Ground by Sue Rainsford, our previous book. If we want to pick 3 words to describe this book: woods, like the forest, fae and folklore and queerness. We have a gay relationship in this book. So if that intrigues you at all, please join me. I would love to chat with you about that book at the end of August. Thank you to my patrons who make videos like this possible. I really appreciate the work that they enable me to do. I hope you are all doing well, that you are staying safe, and I will see you soon with another video. Bye!